quilting ruler because it is 1/4 inch thick for using at your machine. We'll just use a ditch ruler. Hello my friends, and welcome back to the Quilters Apothecary. Today I am extremely excited to introduce you to a wonderful new member of our ruler family, which is the Tidal Wave rounds. And they are our In Cahoots series because I am in cahoots with my dear wonderful friend Sue Heinz to design a wonderful series of rulers that we are just having a blast coming up with and figuring out designs and just being creative, because that's what surface quilting is all about, and design work. So number one, the ruler series itself, which we're showing right here, is at this point a series of 6 rulers. They come in 4, 4.5 sizes, and then the next two would be 6, 6.5, and then the next 2 rulers would be 8, 8.5, which makes a total of 6 rulers. Now, when Sue and I were first designing this, I was really excited about the thought not just of the actual tidal wave ruler based on a round shape, but also I wanted to throw in something extra to the creative process, and that would be a wonderful echo, because I think echoes are amazing when you use designs. It sets the design apart, it separates it from the rest of the quilting, which is why we created them in sets. So for a second I thought, oh, this is great, we'll stop there, and that's where we live. But once I received the whole set of 6 and started playing, what I realized is the echo is wonderful, but then when you add the other rulers into the series and use them, all 6 of them, in the design process, if you want something more extravagant, you come up with some incredible designs. For example, this one shown here, which I think is awesome. It takes all of the wonderful parts of quilting, feathers and circles, and of course the new tidal wave, and makes an amazing medallion. So this first tutorial is going to be an introduction to the tidal wave rounds, and then we're going to take it and we're going to utilize it for some basic designs of some of the different things we can do with the shape itself in a block format, as well as making these amazing medallions that you can pop into new modern quilts or in an open area in a quilt. It doesn't just have to be in a block. And then our next tutorial is going to focus on something that I'm really big time excited about, and that is borders. Because borders can be a little not fresh, right? We've kind of seen it all in the quilting community. And to see something fresh and then also to see it freshly applied is something I'm extremely excited about. And I've done a few of these designs on a border, and I think they're going to blow your mind, just like mine. So let's introduce you. Let's go down, and we're going to work on paper first, and we're going to talk about the shape itself, and then we're going to go into some of the things you can do with this wonderful new ruler. Okay, so one of the things that I want to talk about with this ruler is I refer to this as a quilting ruler because it is 1/4 inch thick for using at your machine with your ruler foot. Obviously, whether you're on a sit down or whether you're on a stand up. As long as you have a ruler foot that accepts your 1/4 inch rulers, you are good. And of course, all stand up machines' ruler feet are predominantly 1/4 inch rulers. Now, I also refer to this as my design ruler because I also use this very same ruler to draw with. And so it's one and the same. We don't have a separate set for drawing. We don't have a separate set for quilting. They are one and the same to me. And again, they are 1/4 inch thick, which is the industry standard, which is what we like. And it is the wonderful poured acrylic, so it is the good acrylic. It's the kind we refer that we know is going to last well. Okay, so now let's go into a little bit more of an introduction. So here are our set of 2, the 4 and the 4.5. So there is the smallest version of the rounds in these that we have at this point. And then I just want to take you through the family. So here we have the 6 and the 6.5. And then, of course, we have the parents, which is the 8 and the 8.5, which is a wonderful size for blocks. Now, what I love about these is the fact that, of course, you can utilize them in tandem in so many different ways, by overlapping, by doing a bunch of different things. Let me put these in our pile here. We also want to remember that whenever you're using these, when you see the In Cahoots and the Tidal Wave, you want to make sure that you can read that right side up, because as you look at this, you can read it. That means the etching, because these rulers are etched. They are not screen printed, i.e. they're not going to wipe away and then you're going to lose your favorite ruler, because a month from now you won't be able to read everything. So these are definitely etched, and they are going to last a lifetime as long as they are well cared for. Now, with these, if, as I was saying, they're flipped like this and everything's backward, then you're going to get a bit of a double vision, because now the etching is at the top. And when you're trying to mark with these or to quilt with these, then you're not going to get a good read. So you always want to make sure the etching is facing down. And you know that because you can read Sue Heinz and Jamie Wallen in Cahoots. You can read that properly. So now let's talk a little bit about what do these actually look like when they're applied. We're going to apply them to paper to start off with. Okay, so let's start with number 1. I made a mark where I wanted to center everything. Now again, if we were doing a block, you would want to do the same thing. Right now we're just kind of doing just a quick introduction to the tools itself and the sizes and how they relate to each other. So there's our middle. I'm going to line up. This has a wonderful mark right there in the middle. I can line right up with the mark that I make there. And I'm simply going to mark around it, just as if I were marking on a quilt. And remember, if I'm marking with a tool with anything that has an innie and an outie, I want to make sure to maneuver my marking tool so that the marking part stays right against the ruler. So if you are using the little rounds that you put the marking tools in to actually get it marked a 1/4 inch away, which is where a hopping foot would hit, you just want to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so now that is our 8.5, which was our large one. Now what I want to do as we go down and introduce all the different sizes is I'm just going to do a north, south, east, west. Mark there, and there is the shape itself. And I am simply going to line that up and give myself a crosshair as I take you down the sizes. Let me put that there so I can see it. There we go. Okay, good. Now I'm going to go down to the next size down, line that up, and of course now with that mark there, And again, this particular ruler, in the out portion as well as the cleavage in between each one, we have registration marks. We also have a wonderful registration mark here, which is something that the wonderful Sue Heinz came up in this design with, to actually do ribbon work with this particular design, which is a tutorial that we'll do down the road. Okay, so I'm going to line that up right in there. And what we're doing right now is I just want to do this so that you can see how these are in relation to each other. Not just the sets of two, but also, now see, that's really cool, in relation to large to small, because when I initially had said I really like the idea of echoing, and we did the echo around ruler, i.e. the ½ inch different to make up the set. What I wasn't taking into account is the way that the rest of the series of 6 would relate to an initial set. And that is where a ton of magic happens. Now, the one thing I love about these is as we use these, so now this is the 6. So line that up. Again, I match my crosshairs. We've got our center mark that I'm centering right there. Coming around. And even this as a design inside of a really cool block, I think is incredible. And we'll even play with this itself to even make it better. Now, this particular one is actually going to be my 4-inch, but we have a little bit bigger one. We have the 4.5-inch. So let's line that up. Again, I've got my center marked. I'm going to line up my crosshairs. Come around. Okay. Oops. Down. And then I've got the 4-inch. And I found that this sizing, when Sue and I were figuring out what sizes we want, was kind of the universal start off. So we may make a larger set as well. Okay, so there are the initial parts. Isn't that awesome? I love that shape. Just on its own, this is amazing. I really love the look of it. And I'll tell you what, so let's take this just as a very simplistic design on its own. What if I were to do this, quilt this out, and it would be fine just like this, or it would be fine if we used a single of each of the sets. And frankly, not just that, but even if we wanted to use a single of just one of the rulers for something, maybe that's all you want in a design. You know, so what I love about this set of rulers is you can take it as extreme. Again, reminder, let me flash up a little bit more of a higher end design. So see, you can take this and do something extreme, or you can do something very simple. And when I think of this, what I loved about this and why I really pushed for something that was circular shaped is that I get, you know, I'm definitely big on feathered wreaths, as most of you know, but sometimes I get tired of circles, so I like ovals as well when I do my feathered wreaths. But then also I thought of this type of a shape when Sue and I were working out the Wave 13, the straight line ruler, and what I wanted was something that we could use with curves. And this kind of was that wonderful marriage of ideas that then she bounced and she came up with the next section of it, and then I'd bounce off that, and it just became this wonderful, wonderful series of these wonderful designs. So let's look at this. We see the options for something very basic, but now let's take something very basic and just take it up a notch. Think in order of up a notch. So what could I do with this? Well, obviously, what I could do with this is I could take the 8, that's the 8, let me take the 8.5. We're going to go back to the 8.5, and I'm going to line this up back in the middle, but as you can see, there's where we had our original. Now, I want to offset it so that we have another notch, these divots, hills right in the center. So I'm going to line this up in the center, take my crotch lines and line those up on my lines that I made for my crosshairs. Just like that. And so now I'm going to go ahead and mark those. Now this is a design tutorial, so we're doing design work for this, and then on the next tutorial, the part 2 of this, we're going to be doing border designs, and then part 3 is us at the machines seeing how I would maneuver some of these designs to make it simple. Because, for example, even though we're marking and I'm lifting the pencil right now, if I were quilting this, I would lock my stitches here, lock, 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 and then I would stop, drag, lock on, do this, lock, 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 stop, drag thread, lock on, and I would do that all the way around. That way we're not having to travel this whole place. And then when it was done, I would just snip the tails in between, which would make that a lot easier. So let's take a look at that. So now we have that really cool tuck behind. But now what if we wanted to add something a little more to that? Now, if I went down to the next size, which would be the 8, because we just used the 8.5, I would have a nice little echo. But what if I want more than a little echo? Then maybe what I would do is audition my 6.5. So if I put my 6.5 there and I offset that, I like that. See, I like that a little better because it gives a little bit more of that negative space, and then I have a little bit more area that I could, if I so chose, use my micro filler in. Okay, so let me center that. Okay, let me put that there. Boom. 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 And again, if I were quilting this, lock stitches, drag, lock stitches, boom, lock stitches, drag, lock stitches, boom, lock, drag, boom, all the way around. And now I have these wonderful areas that if I wanted to fill in, I could go ahead. Now obviously this is a whole different design, but then I could fill in with micro work. Now also notice the center with the circles. So one of the things I'm going to do is, what if in here I wanted to go ahead and drop in a different shape? Now what I could do is I could drop in some really cool diamond type shapes, but I could also drop in some circles. So we see the circles. We see the effect that the circles will do. Let's take this in a little bit different direction so you get a few more ideas for your coffers, and let's grab a diamond. Okay, so now I have my shapes for my diamond, and so I want to put some sort of little something something in there. And so utilizing my crosshair marks, what I'm going to do is line that up. And if I were on a quilt, and again, when we get to the part where we're going to be quilting on the third tutorial for this, you'll see I'm going to mark my diamonds. And then I would just use a ditch ruler, because a long arm diamond would be silly and a waste of a lot of money, especially when you can get tons of sizes like these. Now remember, these are drawn. This one is the drawing ruler. This is not 1/4 inch. This is 1/8 of an inch for our diamonds and our shapes. Okay, so now I could stop there. So now we have that. So now we've taken that design and we've made it something that we can go in and doctor up and do some incredible things. Now, with this particular design, what are a few different ideas? What I might actually do is I would, of course, when I quilt this, do nice thick line, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, come back, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, follow that up, over, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then I've got a nice looking double diamond design here. Let's say I use metallic thread for that. Let's say I use metallic thread for all of these. Now for these, it's up to you. I think single stitch is fine, but I could do that thick stitch around all of these shapes. And then once you get this in, then it's about what are you going to do with it after that? Because this alone would be fine. But I might want to take it a little further and put micro filler in all of these areas. And then what I might want to do is put, and this is where you make a decision. I could either put micro filler in these wider echoes where it skips from the 4 series to the 6 series, and then the 6 series to the 8 series, and I could fill in these, or I could fill in the narrows. So that's where you kind of have to make your decision of how you want to do this. And then of course you decide here, what do you want to do in this section in the center? And one of the things that I might do is, since this would be thick and thick, I would go ahead maybe and put microfill in here. And then maybe what I would do is in this center section around the diamonds up to the first what we would call the 4-inch tidal wave, is maybe I would work from the center and do nice pinstripes all the way over. That's going to be some work because we want to make sure to mark all the way down so that those marks between here and here match the mark between here and here. Now remember, because of this shape, once we get over here, you're going to have to work and play a little bit here, which I love the idea. That doesn't bother me whatsoever, but some of you may think, I'm not sure. And then what I love is if I did those straight lines, almost miniature piano keys, then what I might do is go in and fill in every other one, which would give this amazing texture in the middle. Again, these are just ideas for you to work with yours, or you can also use this working with any other shape that you might use. This would apply if you had circle rulers that were set up at 1/2-inch increments. If you had ovals, you could do the same things if you had our oval rulers. You could do the same thing if you had diamonds. You could do, so you can utilize this even if you're not utilizing it for these amazing tidal wave rulers. Okay, so this would be an initial idea. Now this took it up a notch again. You starting with maybe one of these shapes with an echo might be exactly what you want to do as a simple design. So now what I want to do is let's talk a little bit about how I would take this ruler in a block, and we're going to create this type of a block design. And I'm going to add something a little bit extra at the end of the center medallion portion. Okay, so now let's take that wonderful design and let me show you step by step how I do it. Now I might put a little bit of a spin on it, but also I'll explain when I get to that point how I did the initial design shown here. Okay, so let's go down to the table. All right, so here we have a block. Now in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that it's a rectangle block. It could be in a square block. It could actually be in a round shape. It could be in a hexagon shape. Doesn't matter. You're going to drop this design in the dead center. So you would locate the center. In this case what I did is I simply put a ruler here and then here and located and pinpointed the center of my block. The next thing I'm going to do is I would decide on the sizing for the shape of this particular block, and I know that I have picked out for this particular one, in case you want to duplicate this, the 8.5 as well as the 6.5. So I've got the 8.5 and the 6.5. Okay, so now the next thing that I'm going to do is in my block shape, I want to go ahead and put a vertical line down the center. And do you have to do that? No. But I want my up and down, and I will show you exactly what I mean by that in just a second. So I would line up a ruler, line that up. I've got my center point right there. So I know that my vertical line is straight up through the center there. Now, the reason that I did that is now when I take this and I set this here, I take my center point of the ruler over to the center point in the block and I line that up. I now have a place to line up that etching line straight up and down so that it's perfectly squared and up and down within the block. It's centered perfect. So I've got that lined up. And now I'm going to go ahead and I would, number one, either quilt it. Right now I'm drawing it, and I always suggest to you to draw things out first just so you can get a feel for how everything maneuvers. Plus, your drawing is something great for you to put into your portfolio of designs. We always want to do that. Remember, you're going to forget 80% of your designs through the years that you've done. And so it's nice to have a record of all of the different designs that you do. Okay, so we have that down there. Now, what also I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a divot mark using the ruler itself and the registration lines that are through the top of the humps. And then also, if you so choose, you could go ahead and you could put a line where the line is in the crotch section. That way it's just there. Okay, so now I've got those, got my registration lines in place. Now I'm going to grab my 8.5. And instead of using like the 6.5, I wanted a bigger echo. I wanted a more extreme effect for this particular block design. A little more drama. So I'm going to line that up. And I'm also, as I put the center is always the first place you go. And then once I get that center, now I can turn it to match my lines to that vertical line that's there, as well as it hits, since we did the small shape first, the lines hit the inner portion of all of the other reference marks that I put there. So then I would either mark, because we're on paper, or if you were at the machine, you would be quilting. And again, if you want true to the quilt, if you were marking on paper, what you would use is one of the little circle cylinders with the holes that you could put your pencil in and go around, and that would give you your 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you want to get a set of those, it comes in sets of 3. We get them from Kismet, Sue, and what the 3 different ones are is the different tips for our pencil. If you have a thin pencil, one of the sizes is perfect for the marks be gone, so it's a thicker circle. And the other one is if you have a Sharpie that's one of the thin tip Sharpies. It works for that if you're marking. Okay, so now we have that second one marked. So let's remove that. So now we have the base for our design. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use this same ruler, and now I'm simply going to pivot. So I pivot. Remember, what's the first thing I do? I always locate the center, line that up, and now I can go ahead and use our other lines to line everything and get everything perfectly in place. Because it's not just the center that you have to line up. You also have to make sure that these lines match all of those little reference lines that we put on the tips. And that's what makes this tool so cool. It's a cool tool. So we're going to line that up. That was a little hip, Rich. I don't know. I'm not that hip, so maybe you want to edit that out. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add that in. Mark all the way around, just right to the edge of what you already have there. Now, if you were quilting, remember we would drag and drop. So you'd lock your stitches, drag, drop, lock, quilt, lock, drag, drop, lock. And again, if you wanted a thicker line, you would just do your 1, 2, 3 around the tip. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's what you would do if you wanted a little bit of a bolder quilt line if you were quilting. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Okay, come all the way around. Almost there. Okay, so now we came all the way around. We've got that in. Remove. And so there is that step. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to re-grab that initial size that we had, which was the 6.5, which we did on the inside portion. And now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to pivot that one too to put that little extra echo in there. Let me bring the marked out design. So that would be this little guy here. Again, if we went with the 8.5 is what we used out here. If we went with the 8, it would give an echo. It just wouldn't give a very big echo. So here's our 8.5. Here is our 8. It's always good to go ahead and just have a piece where you can see the 8, 8.5 compared to the 6.5, 6, 4.5, 4. Okay. And what I love about this, by the way, is that our 8, 8.5, 6, 6.5, we decided to make it a little more fancy and went a little narrow with our echo down the side. It just adds that wonderful movement that makes this design what I think is a little more exciting. On our 4, we wanted just a regular echo all the way. But here we wanted to add just a little bit of magic to that. Make it a little more fancy schmancy. All right, So again, that smaller one goes here. Line up that center here first. And then once you get the center lined up, pivot. So all of our marks hit, boom, center, boom, center, boom, center, boom, center. Everything looks good. Yay, nay, fine tune a little bit. Come down, down, tip, and again I would be doing my drop, lock, drag all the way around, snip the threads once we're done. And under the quilt, if I were on a long arm, I'd just wait until the quilt is done before I would trim those bottom tails. And again, usually for me, I'm completing the whole quilt before I put my micro work in, so that would work fine. I would go ahead and trim my tails once it's being rolled up into the quilt as I go through the quilt. So that's one of the ways I handle that. So, okay, so now we have our initial base right in there. Okay, so now my next step that I'm going to do, I have my marks here. So I'm going to go ahead, I've got our vertical line through the center. Now I'm going to go ahead and do my horizontal line. And I'm checking, for me, 3 places. I'm checking the center, and I'm checking to make sure that my little divots that I put there are there. And I'm just going to do the middle. I don't have to go all the way through. Some of the designs down the road here, when we do some more intense tutorials on different things we can do with these, and combo tutorials using different tools, we'll play with a little bit more extending lines, but right now we're just going to do that. Okay, and I'm telling you, I've got some great designs from this wonderful tool that blew my mind, and I think it's going to blow a lot of your minds. You know, it's exciting to have something fresh in your toolbox that you actually use and like to use. Make sure quilting look fresh, and wait until our next tutorial when we go over borders. Okay, so now I've gone ahead, I have marked that section. So now the next thing that I want to do is I could make a decision and go ahead and I could put some lines here as well across this way, so I could go in between. In our initial design, what we did is then I dropped in a circle. So for that, I'm just going to mark that. Let me grab my circles here. So this would be quilted except for the lines that are registration lines, and then I would choose a circle size to put my mark in, and let me see, I think I'm going to use this size right here. And don't forget, on our shapes, when they come to you, they have this paper to protect them. Okay, let me peel that right off of there. Yay. So, yes, sometimes I peel it off, sometimes I don't. I always peel off the center one, and that was a new set, so I hadn't peeled it off yet. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to center that right there. I'm going to center that on top. And what I'm going to mark is, let me get this, 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 this. I'm going to mark my outer. What that's going to do is that's going to give me a guideline for where my feathers are going to come to, right there. So on this one, let's talk a little bit about what I did here. on this one, what I actually did was where did I start? I started here. Yep, I started here, and I started right there. I made my lines like I made here. And so let me do this. I am going to erase this because I'm just telling you how I did this. So I started right here. Thank you. So I did my swirl back, backtrack, new frond, swing away and back, backtrack, new frond. Much like we've done our feathers, if you go back and look at the feather tutorials that we did from our Feather Extreme video. So I would work my way all the way in and out of the valleys, and that's what these are for, so that you have room to work into the valley and then come out of the valley. Now we went over that in our special feather tutorials, which we have the whole series that's been started here. So you can go back and check that out. And by the time I was done and worked my way all the way around, what I have is this wonderful undulating feather all the way around. Looks wonderful because you're able to go into the valley and then come out of the valley, and everything's divided perfect. But I think what I want to do with this is to go to what? And I think a lot of you know where I'm going to head with my feathers with this. And that is, you get how I did that. But what if I wanted to go use my favorite, which is my lotus feather in that space? Then what I would do, remark a little bit my extension, is that's when I would go ahead and I would add my crotch to crotch reference lines. Make sure you go straight across, right through the center. One, again, these would be with chalk. Line that out. Make sure my head doesn't get in the way. Did I miss one? Yes. Right through there. Now really, I don't have to go through the circle, but I did. Okay. That's something. Remember, these lines are going to wipe away when we're done anyways. Okay, so now I have those all lined up. So now I could, depending on which way I wanted to take my lotus, I could start here with my lotus and head into the center, or I could start from the center and work my way out, and these would be the separate sides of the lotus. So if I were doing that, go ahead, I would start here, and at that point, if this was what I was going to do, I would go ahead and I would quilt this circle using the inside circles that we have, the puzzle piece. So I would lock, teardrop, swing up, backtrack, new frond, keep it tight, swing up, backtrack, double bump, swing around, come in, swing up, backtrack, and I would just double bump down that side, because a double bump, remember from our Feather Extreme, a double bump is going to fit into those awkward spaces. Same thing here. Swing up, frond, keep it tight though, because otherwise you're going to run out of room here. Swing up, backtrack, double bump, curve around, in, and then here you want to go ahead and swing up, back, double bump, come around, you would follow your circle back around, and then you would start again. So you would end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You would end up with 8 of those really cool lotus looking feathers. And then of course at that point what I would do is I would go into here And I would lock my stitches and start doing my micro work here to fill that in to get this wonderful effect here. And then, of course, I would have, instead of this undulating feather, I would have a lotus feather around the outside. Now, the one thing that I also want to add is this, and I want to show you one last thing that'll give us 3 good ideas for you to get started. Okay, so we have this. Let's just say I've got a block. I'm going to locate my center. My table gets as full as my quilt does when I'm at the machine. And as many of you know, sometimes I have 10 or 12 rulers weighing down that quilt on the machine. Okay, so there is the center. Center. Get rid of that. Okay. What am I doing? What am I doing? Where am I going? Okay, that's right. All right, so now I am going to grab first my 4-inch, which is the smallest. I'm going to line that up. We'll pretend that this is just how we did before. I'm going to choose to put, if you don't care how that shape pivots on there, you're fine. I like to center it. And if the rectangle were landscape, then this is how I would center it, this way, if that's how the quilt was laid out. But if it was portrait, i.e. the blocks were long, then I would go ahead and do the same thing. So I would do it this way, of course. But just want to clarify because I know those questions come up for folks. Okay, so now I have that. I'm going to start here with my 4-inch. And I'm simply going to mark. So I line up my vertical line here. I've got my center there. Got this. I am marking now. Even if I were on the quilt, this is a mark. This is not the quilting. So that is my 4-inch. I would then go to my 6-inch. Line that up. Now this one would actually be quilted. And actually, for this one, that 1/4 inch, like I wouldn't use a 1/4 inch extender to mark that first 4-inch. I'd want it in tight like that. So I would put this like this, all the way around there. So now I have that one. And now I would grab my 3rd and final, which would be drawn. So this middle one, drawn. Next one out, quilted. Next one out, and I think I'll grab the 8.5. Line that up. And I would actually probably, just to give myself a little bit of more space, I would grab my extender and put it there to mark this one out, which would add a 1/4 inch to that. Again, these are things that you want to play with on paper to get, okay, what do I like? What's the effect? It's part of building your portfolio. So now what I have is outer one's marked, second one in is quilted, third one is marked. Now very simply what I would do is I would go ahead and while I had my ruler here, I would make my divots here. Boom, locate, 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 locate. Do you have to? No. I just tend to like to do that. And then at that point, then what I would do is I would make my mark from here to here on all of those. Again, this is just my thoughts and my ideas for this. And then what I would do is, if you wanted to feather, if this is the inside, the middle of your wreath, then very simply, you would be feathering around the inside. And that's where those registration marks might come in handy if you wanted to split that evenly. You could do some really cool play with some lotus-y type feathers. But right now, let's just stick to regular wreath type feathers with this wonderful tidal wave shape. Go down into the valley. And again, this is where a mark here where that center was might come in real handy. So you'd stop there, curve, bump, head up, curve, bump, head up. So you go up and continue all the way around there, and then of course you have your inside of the wreath. So you would end up doing your inside feathers. Bump. And on your inside, that's where you would use the top of the hill. So the outside, I use the bottom of the hill for the split to get around, and on the inside, I use the top of the hill to get around. So that way, let me see, once I do that, bump, come around, now you start to swing it around, bump, new frond, and then you end up with this wonderful feathered wreath. Again, the quilted line is the second line in. These are chalk. They're going to wipe away. And then you could go ahead and just echo the outside of your feathers to pop those out, and then do something really cool like some sort of little medallion on the inside. Again, this is just another way to utilize these. So these are 3 simple ways here, and of course here, our introduction to these wonderful shapes. All right, so now that is our introduction to this. Again, I think it's an incredible tool. It's fresh, it's exciting, and these block designs that I've shown you are very basic. It's just skimming the surface. There are so many different things that we can do with these shapes, as well as the other shapes that we already have introduced and that we have and that a lot of you have into your stash. So I'm excited about this. The next time we do our wave tutorial, we will be working with our borders, and then the tutorial after that will be at the machine, and we'll be doing some more exciting things for that. As always, I so appreciate the fact that you've spent time with me. I know when you take time away from other things in your life, because we're all busy, that you are investing in our time together, and I so appreciate that. And I need to let you know that, as always, you know that you are all loved. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We will see you all down the road. Goodbye, everybody.